Tenants are waiting years on Section 8 waiting lists, but landlords still aren't willing to accept the vouchers. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting article for you today, and it's going over one of my favorite topics, and that's Section 8, okay? Now, obviously, there are a lot of landlords out there who do not want to participate in this program for a multitude of reasons. Everything from, hey, the tenants themselves seem to be a big problem, but the government regulations and all of the bureaucracy that's involved in the program also are a huge detractor. Not only that, but landlords can oftentimes make more money on rent than they could if they were getting paid through the Section 8 program. So, I mean, there's a good number of reasons why a lot of landlords just don't want to do it. Now, me personally, I have no issues with it, but the majority of my tenants, right, they are regular retail tenants. They do not get their rental assistance. They don't get rental assistance from the government. I do have two tenants now who are Section 8 tenants. So when I bought a new property just a couple of months ago, I actually bought two brand new duplexes a couple of months ago. And once again, I inherited more Section 8 tenants. So this is obviously becoming a more common thing even within me. So like I said in my last video, at the beginning of the year, Section 8 did an inspection on my property with a tenant in it, and I had to pay, I think I spent a little over $1,000 fixing all the problems that the inspection called out and said that I needed to fix. And it was stuff as simple as, hey, your fire alarm and your carbon monoxide alarm aren't working. Well, that's because the tenant didn't change the batteries. Okay, the batteries were dead. It's pretty simple. It's not my responsibility to change the batteries on them. When they moved in, the batteries, the alarms, everything was working great. The alarms, they didn't stop working. They just didn't have good batteries in them. And in my personal opinion, the tenant should be responsible for that. But you know, I had my property manager get all over it and fix all the little nitpicky little things. And guess what? I still have my tenant in there. I'm still getting paid. Everything is good. So more of that is to come. But anyway, this article is talking about how, I believe it's in Massachusetts, they have finally opened up the voucher program. And, you know, there's this huge waiting list of people trying to get these vouchers. But a lot of landlords just aren't having it. And, you know, that's a big problem. I mean, how do we solve this issue? I don't know exactly, you know, honestly. And then the question becomes, for me personally, why are there so many tenants who are waiting for years, completely able to pay their rent without government help, but then suddenly need government help when their name finally is called on the list? You know, that kind of sounds like a little bit of fraud in my opinion. So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like and subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think, okay? What do you think of these tenants who are waiting for years to get Section 8? Do you really think they need it, or do you think they don't need it? And why, okay? I mean, I already told you what I think. And, you know, so much of this socialized housing stuff, it isn't good for people overall. And we really need to move further and further away from it. But I understand that there is some need for temporary housing assistance. Keep that in mind, what I just said, temporary, you know, to help people get over a rough time. And I'm not talking about people who are on, you know, Section 8 for 20 or 30 years straight. I'm talking about people who, you know, maybe need 6 months, you know, of housing assistance so that they can get over whatever crisis they're going through at that time. So let's get into this article. So this article is coming from WGBH.org, and it says, renters raise the alarm on illegal discrimination. And yeah, that's what they call it when landlords don't want to accept Section 8. They call it income discrimination. You know, they try to make the terminology look like, oh, you're being racist or something, but no, you're just doing the best thing for you and your business. All right, so let's get into it. Ellen applied for a Section 8 housing voucher in 2018 because she was having trouble paying the rent for her Malden apartment, where she lives with her two sons. She works part-time in a nursing home. A voucher would be a huge help by covering a portion of her rent with government funds, capping the amount she pays at 30% of her income. Finally, after 3 years of waiting, Ellen's voucher application was approved. She asked her landlord if she'd be willing to accept the Section 8 voucher. What she said was no, because they want to sell the building and they don't want the commitment of having to give me a year's lease. Perfectly reasonable for the landlord to say that. But then you have to question, just like I was just saying, right? This lady who applied for Section 8 back in 2018 was finally approved after 3 years. Well, how was she paying the rent for the last 3 years? If she is so destitute and poor that she can't afford the rent, how was she paying it for 3 years? Because she doesn't really need the Section 8 voucher. And see, this is my problem with these socialized housing things, right? You're giving this woman who isn't really in the financial distress free housing or super discounted housing, and on the backs of the taxpayers, right? And through this government program, you're creating a dependent. So what she'll do now is she'll purposefully earn less, even if she could get a higher paying job, because she knows she's going to lose these benefits. I've seen it before. I know this sort of stuff happens. It's not uncommon at all. Okay, and as you can tell, this is the kind of person we're wasting the money on. The Section 8 shouldn't even be covering this type of person. If she could have afforded their rent for 3 years straight while she's waiting on this list, then there's a problem. And after 3 years, who knows if she was having economic problems back in 2018, why is it that she couldn't get out of that crisis after 3 years? Okay, I mean, this is why I say this stuff should be temporary, not permanent. Anyway, let's continue. So Ellen started looking for a new place. When she called about one apartment she was interested in, the agent asked if she had a voucher. And I said, yes, I have a voucher, she remembered. And they said, oh, I can't work with that. Just flat out, I can't work with the voucher. I mean, what can I say at that point? I can't make somebody take it. Ellen is not alone. After waiting years to receive a voucher, many of the thousands of recipients discover it's seemingly impossible to find an apartment where landlords and real estate agents are willing to accept it, especially when recipients have just a few months to find housing. Yeah, I don't know why, but for some reason they make it so that the voucher is only good for this little short period of time. It might take them a little bit longer to find a rental unit, but it is what it is. If you can't find somebody who's willing to take it, the federal government set the Section 8 program up to be voluntary. Okay, you can't force landlords to take it. Well, these states are trying. Okay, they're passing these things that say, oh, source of income discrimination. Places like New York, and I'm sure Massachusetts probably has a law like this on the books. And they're just saying, hey, if you don't take this, then you're a bad person. No, you're not a bad person. You have a multitude of good reasons not to want to deal with Section 8. Okay, not everybody is a low-income landlord like I am, okay? I deal with lower-income tenants. That is my bread and butter, okay? And that was how I was able to get into the landlord game, because those properties are a lot less expensive. But imagine, you're spending big bucks on properties. You don't want Section 8 tenants in there because you don't want to jump through the hoops of the bureaucracy, inspections, etc., the delays on getting payment, and the problems you might have to deal with the tenants, and you just say no. Well, there's nothing wrong with that. And that's despite the fact that it's illegal to discriminate against people in Massachusetts because they have a voucher. Yeah, that's what I thought. State law says landlords and agents can't discriminate based on source of income, including vouchers. The federal program, formed nearly 50 years ago, administers direct rental aid to landlords through local housing authorities. A major question for would-be renters and housing researchers is, why would landlords reject tenants whose rent is partly guaranteed by the government? Some in the real estate industry blame bureaucracy for months-long delays, even as advocates offer evidence of discrimination and push for accountability. Yeah, and see, this is the problem, right? Advocates don't talk to landlords, okay? They don't know anything about our mindset when we're going into renting an apartment. They have no clue, okay? And the fact that they don't talk to landlords is why they can't figure this stuff out, okay? This is insane that they think that landlords are discriminating when they are making smart business decisions for their properties and their businesses. For Ellen, who asked to use only her middle name to not jeopardize her chances of getting an apartment, those rejections kept happening. It took me maybe a couple of months to start to realize, wow, I think I'm really discriminated against here, she said. Often, she just doesn't get a call back on an application, even after she's already paid a fee. On top of that is the stress of the voucher's deadline. She's already gotten several extensions on the 4-month time limit. So yeah, they do have extensions on the time limit, but keep in mind another fact. The rental market right now is hot, okay? So there are more tenants than there are units available. So a landlord will oftentimes have quite a few very well qualified tenants for each unit that they are renting out. I know this for a fact because I have had no problem renting anything that I own. And I don't have to take a Section 8 tenant if I don't want to. If I wanted to, I can get plenty of very well qualified tenants who are just regular rent payers, and I wouldn't have to deal with any of the bureaucracy. I wouldn't have to deal with any of the government inspections, and I wouldn't have to worry that I'm putting a bad tenant in my place, because the Section 8 tenants are known for their problems. So, yeah, this is an interesting article. It shouldn't surprise anyone that landlords, even in places where these laws exist, still are going out of their way to exclude the Section 8 tenants because they don't want to deal with it. Okay, and yeah, some of them are going to get caught up in, I did a story on a large landlord in New York who got fined pretty heavily by the New York Attorney General. But in a lot of cases, there's no enforcement on this sort of law. And that's why landlords feel they can get away with it. And I don't blame them one bit.